Hello and welcome to another video from Flash Jazz Cat. This week on the table we have an Atari XEGS motherboard. It did arrive in the case. There's the case. It's a little bit yellow on the top, not too bad on the bottom. But this one's been sent in ostensibly to have a VBXE, a Spectre AV and an Ultimate 1 megabyte. But I actually forgot that the Ultimate 1 megabyte's already been fitted, but not in the most elegant fashion. When I took the case apart, I couldn't understand why the screw wouldn't come out, because there's a central screw in the bottom of the case there. But it was actually inside the case. They've actually cut away the pylon into which that screw would normally go on the top half of the case, and I've used that as the mounting point for the Ultimate. If you look there, you can see the pylon that goes straight through there. But of course, since we're going to fit this, the VBXE, which is going to go into the Antic socket, which is directly underneath where that Ultimate is, this is going to have to come out. But first, a word from our sponsor, PCBWay, who are currently celebrating 11 years in the business of providing PCB prototyping and manufacturing services. PCBWay also offer CNC machining and 3D printing services. They can even provide a flexible PCB or a rigid flex PCB, which is a combination of the two. And with their instant quote system and excellent customer support, you can be sure that your project is going to turn out just right. So if you'd like to support the sponsor and in so doing support this channel, visit PCBWay today. Not only for that reason, I mean, there's been no serious attempt to route the ribbon cables. Apparently it works fine and that's great, but I can't really endorse installing stuff in this fashion primarily because it looks a mess. And I'm going to have to undo all this anyway in order to install the VBXE. There's another set of wires here. I don't know what these are for. They go into some resistors next to the GTI chip. I have no idea what they're for. They seem to go nowhere. They just end up in this connector here. I don't know what that's for. But the most exciting thing about this, of course, is that I've finally got my hands on a purple Ultimate 1 megabyte board. I'm going to take it out of the machine. I'm not even going to test this machine because I'm told it works. I can't be bothered to go and find the composite video cable that I'd need to actually connect it to the monitor. I'm going to install a DIN 5 connector on it anyway. So I'm just going to take this off because I want to have a look at this board. You'd think washers didn't exist in the modern world as well. I mean, they've been around for years and just never, you see nuts but no fucking washers. Anyway, I'll put this out of the way for a moment and have a closer look at this. Now, I've been wanting to get my hands on one of these for, well, actually the better part of a year or more since I made the SIDE3 is a Nightmare video last July, so July 2024. That's around the time I became aware of a new revision of Ultimate 1 megabyte that was purple, more expensive than the previous one. The previous one being a black PCB with Alliance SRAM and the bodge diode that was necessary to get the RAM to work correctly, because for some background information, since the inception of the Ultimate 1 megabyte, it always had Renesas branded SRAM chips, these two chips here, and that was all tickety-boo, and it was pretty much a bulletproof upgrade. Never had any problems with it, with timing and that kind of thing. I think the only problems that were ever introduced previously with the Ultimate 1 megabyte was some variation in the quality of the PLC flash ROM. I think I tried in the early days, tried to use an AMD chip, and I think they originally shipped with AMIC branded chips, the SST now, and have been for a decade or more. But as soon as these boards started to use the SST flash ROMs with the Renesas SRAMs, they were absolutely trouble-free. It made life very, very easy that the Ultimate 1 megabyte was so robust, so predictable. And I think the only issue, the sort of long-standing issue that required a bit of a bodge, was with the 1200 XL machine. It has a bit of a noisy reset line, and there's a couple of fixes for that. The simplest being a little capacitor between the reset and ground pins on the CPU or underneath this board. Other than that, it's been absolutely flawless. Or it was flawless until early 2024 when I received a report, which I've gone through this before, but I'll just recap it here. I'll link to the article I wrote about it. I received a report from a contact who was a very, very big customer of the Ultimate 1 megabyte. I mean, a really big customer, and he bought them in such a large quantity to install in machines that he was selling on eBay. He would actually pay me my firmware commission every time he installed my firmware, which he was prone to doing before he sold the machine for obvious reasons. He'd buy the stock version and thereby deny Litharek his cut of the FJC firmware premium that he was charging, of which I got about 60%. I don't know whether the 40% went. Apparently it was taxes and expenses and costs and overheads and all that bullshit. But this particular individual bought them with stock firmware, installed my firmware on it, sold the machine, and paid me my commission, which was basically the same as the full surcharge that the buyer would have to spend to buy it with the firmware pre-installed. So I got more money from this particular methodology than I would if he'd bought it with my firmware pre-installed, which is very nice. But unfortunately, Litharek got nothing out of this. And what happened in early 2024 is this particular individual experienced some unusual stability issues with some new then black PCB Ultimate 1 megabytes that he'd bought from Retro Lemon, raised the issue with Jakob at Retro Lemon, who then referred the issue to Litharek, because the issue, which was involved clearly a timing issue, an anti-RAM access issue. You get little flex birdies on the screen corruption, crashes, boots straight to the self-test. I had such a machine with exactly that kind of board in a fairly recent video, which has got the "Here we go again" thumbnail. And that actually turned out to be caused by the PLCC flash ROM. It so transpired that the board that this person was having a problem with was among the first to have the Alliance SRAM, and later on we discovered that there'd been some after the fact bodges to alter the voltage to the RAM, because the Alliance SRAM that Litharek had started to use instead of the Renesas didn't behave quite correctly with TTL logic, so there was that modification done to the board. And I think there seemed to be a change in supplier of the SST flash ROMs, because the only confirmed issue that I managed to replicate, as I say, it was earlier in this year, it's on a video, was completely solved by simply replacing the shipped PLCC flash ROM, take it out, threw it away, and I replaced it with some that I'd bought, brand new ones, and everything worked perfectly fine. So in that case, the problem was actually the PLCC flash ROM. But in any case, for one reason or another, changes were made and problems were introduced, whether it was caused by the RAM or whether it was caused by the flash ROM. Very difficult to quantify, but problems certainly existed. The response to this, obviously the bodge diode was an interim measure. What we've got now, which has been advertised since early to mid 2024, so a year ago now, was a purple Ultimate 1 megabyte, a completely rerouted board. This is it. And there's now nothing on the back at all. The only through-hole parts are the pin headers. So the PLCC socket is also now surface mount. The battery's been moved to the top. Things have been moved around a bit so that you don't have to actually remove the board to replace the battery. It's very rare that you have to replace the battery anyway. But to facilitate this change, a switch has been made from the CR2032 coin cell to the smaller CR1220, like this one here. And as I say, we've got a surface mount socket. Other than that, programming headers moved around, the CPLD's been moved around, everything's been shuggied around to save space. And presumably changes have also been, the RTC crystal is much smaller. That's the RTC chip, which contains the non-volatile RAM. And we've got a tiny little crystal here. So everything's more compact. And there's precedent for this, and I'll show you exactly what it is. The layout of this board is indeed very similar to this one. Now this is what was called a Pancake 1 megabyte board. There we go. So it's on the back. These hail from, well, a few years ago now. I think 3-4 years ago, I'm not too sure. This particular variant has the CPLD on the back, but it's got the battery on the top. But a broadly similar layout. I think the objective with this particular board was to make it smaller. If they'd kept the original footprint, they could have easily fitted the CPLD on the top, and you would have ended up with basically this. Now, in response to this, and I'm not going to go into detail here about where it came from, how I got hold of it, who manufactured it, who was distributing it. That's a separate discussion entirely, but this is a completely unlicensed design based on a reverse engineering of the older revision of the Ultimate 1 Megabyte. Now that information was basically publicly available. Quite a simple board, very easy to reverse engineer it for anybody vaguely competent. Now the thing is, I'm not too sure about what the patent arrangements are that Latharek believes he has on this particular design, which he bought wholesale from Candle Sin some years ago. One thing that is without question is that he bought and now owns the rights to the CPLD code that's flashed to this chip and makes the thing work. It's completely useless, a total ornament, without that code that was written by Candle Sin and sold to Latharek. Now he has the rights to that code. So the main problem with this design, the Pancake 1024 kilobyte or the Pancake 1 megabyte, is that it relies on that same CPLD code flashed to that chip for it to function. So it is, in that sense, it's a copyright infringement because it's using proprietary code to which Latharek owns the rights. If you wanted a sort of a parallel to this, you could use, for example, when the Far Eastern companies started to make PC clones in the 80s and 90s, to avoid licensing problems, or basically avoid getting sued by IBM, rather than disassemble, so the equivalent thing there would be the BIOS, so rather than disassemble the BIOS, or just include the original BIOS code on the cloned machine, which would have definitely resulted in a lawsuit, what they did is they re-implemented, blind, without any reference to source code or disassembly, they re-implemented the IBM BIOS, or a functionally identical equivalent thereof, based on the functionality. So by specs, in a sense, and that's how they got rid of the problems. And therefore there would be no way to prove that there was replicated code in the IBM clone BIOS, even if it was functionally identical. Now, what I think conceivably whoever did this could have done, if they had the knowledge or the skill or the talent, is to re-implement blind, in a similar fashion, the CPLD code for the Ultimate 1 megabyte, so that it was functionally the same, but without using the original code, which they plainly did not do, and that's partly where all the controversy came from. So this is in many ways a direct response to the Pancake Ultimate 1 megabyte. It doesn't do anything new, it works exactly the same way as all the old ones did. Hopefully better, in fact, because the vendor told me when I'd had problems with a recent black PCB Ultimate 1 megabyte with the diode modification on it, and I had to replace the flash ROM, I was told that hopefully the purple ones will be better. So there we are, so that's what we hope. Now, if you look in the top corner here, there is now a place for what I'm assuming is a diode. It's labelled D1, and I'm wondering if that would be the same diode that was bodged onto the older boards, but now with an actual proper footprint, but it's not populated. So maybe they've taken other mitigation measures to fix the issue with the SRAM that required this diode. I don't know. Anyway, it's very nice. I'm not too keen on the purple colour, and I don't see how it being purple and having the battery on top warrants a £10 increase in the purchase price, because it does absolutely nothing new. I remarked on this in the side video last year, almost a year ago now, that simply changing the colour of the board and laying it out a bit differently, let's give us another 10 quid there. At least it's probably gone up more than that by now. I mean, these things are... When they used to have my firmware on with my firmware surcharge, these were knocking on the door of 100 quid. Of course, they're now sold, to the best of my knowledge, only with the stock firmware on them, because I dared to be critical about SIDE3 in a video. There's no more licensing agreement ongoing between me and Latharek as of last year. So you get this with the stock firmware, and you can upgrade it yourself to my firmware, although it's unclear from a careful reading of Latharek's warranty policy whether a software upgrade or a firmware upgrade is actually covered under the warranty. So you may or may not actually be voiding the warranty by applying my firmware after the fact. So you're on the horns of a dilemma there. You can't buy it with my firmware pre-installed, and if you install it after the fact, as far as I can see, it appears to me that you void the warranty by upgrading the firmware, which is very, very interesting indeed, since that same firmware was previously sold by the vendor with the warranty intact. Now, I'm not too sure which firmware this board's actually got on it, but I'll be interested to see how it behaves when it's upgraded. What I find especially interesting about this is that I've had to wait over a year to actually get hands on one of these new purple boards, completely rearranged and newly laid out Ultimate 1MB boards, despite the fact that I wrote the firmware that's used in probably 95% of cases on these boards. They obviously didn't care enough to actually provide me with one of these redesigned boards prior to putting them on sale, or even after putting them on sale. Nobody was prepared to send one in for review or evaluation or testing in any way, shape or form, because I'd be probably well positioned to put this in a few machines and report any teething problems. But no, almost July 2025, a year later, I finally got hands on one of these purple Ultimate 1MB boards, because I fucked if I was going to pay for one myself, just for the privilege of actually looking at it and making a video about it and providing free advertising for it. But no, the only reason I've got this one is because a client has actually sent it in pre-installed in an Atari XEGS. I wonder what they were worried about. I mean, you think if you've just released a new version of this board, it's a pretty purple colour, it's got a new layout, the battery's on the top, very exciting indeed. Well, why would you not send it to the person who wrote the firmware that's used on 95% of boards? Very interesting indeed, and I can't even blame this on the SIDE3 controversy, because this thing was mooted before that video even got published. As I said before, you never get the feeling you're outside of the circle of trust for some reason. The writing was definitely on the wall with this whole arrangement, anyway.
Well, you can't start a circle of trust. It's my circle.
You know what? You don't have a patent on the circle, Jack.
Fuck's sake.
But anyway, I've got hold of one now, so let's get the work done on this machine. Have a look at this board in action. Alright, a significant amount of time has passed since the last bit of footage I shot on this machine. But it is basically complete now, so I'm going to run through what's actually been done to it, and I'm going to show you it working and talk about some of the bumps in the road that resulted in this job taking as long as it did. So first of all, in the interests of clarity here, and I know people love to see things go wrong for people, not necessarily out of a sense of malice, but it's part of the human experience. And of course I am a human being like anybody else. Now, one of the first things I wanted to get out of the way with this particular job, because as you can see it's got a VBXE installed in it, was the cutting of the case at the back here for the two new monitor ports. The XEGS initially, it just has one hole for the RF modulator, which obviously I've taken off, and then you've got an RCA connector for composite video. That's all the machine ships with, composite video and RF, and audio as well, mono audio. So obviously the thing to do here, I wanted, since we've got also the Spectre AV board here, obviously I wanted to add S-Video, Chroma Luma, that is, as well as the better quality composite that comes from that board. So obviously we needed a stock 5-pin DIN jack, which will take a standard Atari monitor cable, as well as our DIN 13 connector for the VBXE's RGB video. So I have a fairly tried and tested means of putting these holes in the backs of machines, and it's even improved recently because I got proper hole templates, and eventually I bought myself a series of step drills which are absolutely ideal for this kind of job. Although in the case of this specific context, it's a little bit difficult because you're often cutting an offset from an existing hole, the RF modulator, so you've got no material to actually drill your pilot hole in. I suppose you could clamp something on the back of the case or what have you, but I found ways around it anyway, and this is particularly nice. One thing that I have found to be quite successful is to rough cut the hole with the Dremel once it's been traced out, and then use this as a finishing tool once the rough cut's been done, and of course this will result in a perfectly round finished hole as long as the drill centers itself in the appropriate position, which mandates that the hole is basically finished and circular before we go in with this being the final step. And that works out quite well for me, and it's much better than what I used to do years ago when I didn't have any proper tools, which was basically to cut the thing out by hand and then sort of do the filing with a rounded back file by hand, and somehow managed to get good results. But this is much easier and it's much less time consuming. However, the problem that I found, and I don't think I'd actually used this step drill on the XEGS model prior to this, is that the plastic casing of the XEGS is very thick. It is more than, well, it's about 3mm thick, which is what, about 1/8 of an inch? Now you might think the steps on these drill bits, they're about 4 to 5mm, but of course they're cut at an angle. These steps are not parallel to the horizontal plane of the drill or the vertical plane of the drill. They're kind of a very, very slight spiral shape. So you've only really got a sort of a 3mm window where you've got through the plastic itself right the way through, so the hole's properly cut, before the next step starts to cut in to the plastic on the outside of the case. And this is the problem I had with this particular case. So to sort of illustrate the point, if we put the drill bit through there, so let's say we were cutting on the third step from the end, if we look on the inside, that particular step has just barely made it through the wall of the case, and we're already at the point where we're going to start cutting in with the next step, which is what we don't want to do. So this is the problem I had with this particular case, and it went horribly, horribly wrong, and the only way to recover from it was to completely cut this part out. It's the first time in 17 years or whatever it is that I've had an unrecoverable disaster like this with the back of a case. So that's what we've got now. It actually looks okay, but there were other problems with the case that I mentioned earlier in the video anyway. We've also got a stress fracture, which you can barely see. Well, if I open it up like that, there we go. We've got a stress fracture which is opened up here. If you get the top half of the case, we've got the aforementioned issue where this screw pillar was forcibly removed by the installer because he wanted to use the hole in the middle of the motherboard to secure the Ultimate 1MB, which I had to move anyway, but I'll get more into what I've done to the board in a minute. So all these things together, some of which were my fault and some of which I had no control over whatsoever, plus the fact that the case wasn't in great shape, it's not a very nice colour, and retro brighten is another topic in itself. Not really a permanent solution, and of course it costs extra money to do all that sort of stuff, despite the fact we've had ideal weather for that kind of thing here in the UK for the past few weeks. So confidence in this particular case was completely lost. I see actually the console button, this power button started to go yellow, so is that blue button. So the customer anyway was really, really good about this. I have to say, you could not want a more understanding client. He really understands what's involved in this stuff, and he's keen to expand the collection anyway. So he managed to source another XEGS, and this second case is the case that belonged to that second machine, and as you can see, it's in much, much nicer shape. You can really see how yellow that power button is compared to this one here, likewise with the blue button. This is just a beauty by comparison. It's not perfect. I did a lot of cleaning on this cover. There's quite a lot of scuff marks on the top, which you probably can't really pick up on the camera, but I mean, it's not perfect, but for what it is, it's very nice indeed. So this is the one we're going with. And as for the original machine, we're just going to try and make the best of it. We're going to put some upgrades in that one at a later date, and so it is what it is anyway. So we got a second chance at doing the holes, and as you can see, second time around it turned out pretty much perfectly. So I'm very happy with that, and I didn't use the step drill to finish these holes off. What I actually ended up doing was using parts from a socket set and wrapping sandpaper around them, and this gives me an infinitely adjustable series of sort of sanding drums that I can just twist around in the hole like that to finish it off and give it a perfectly round appearance. So that's what I did. So I learned something from this, and it's another handy little technique. What I would like to do, of course, is buy a step drill which has a much deeper gap between the different drill sizes, but whether such a thing is available, I don't know. You really want probably about 10 mil, so the step drill would be about this long. But whether such things are available or not, I don't know. So anyway, back to the board. If I take the board out. So we've installed VBXE, nothing particularly unusual about that. You've seen that done before on this channel. I referred back to another video of mine just to remind myself really where was the best place to put the ultimate 1MB on a machine that's equipped with VBXE and with Spectre AV as well. I think I did once put the ultimate board down here in the bottom corner, but we can't do that here because of this. So we've put it here, and it sits quite nicely above the two video jacks there. I think it looks really super neat. It's properly attached to the board now, not like it was when it arrived here. So that's all gone together quite nicely, and we've got the two jacks butted right up against each other, but we've still got just enough space for a nice little gap between the two holes in the case. So everything is nice and solid. On the bottom here, we've got fairly fiddly sort of cabling and wiring. Got to be careful of that one because that's been nipped in the case. You see, there's just so many things you've got to think of. Might have to replace that one because there's a little peg that goes through the bottom of the board on the bottom case there, and that wire must have got trapped there, which is nice, and it's actually pulled the wire clean off there, so we're going to have to fix that as well. Right, so disaster averted there. I fixed this wire. This is indeed the audio wire. It's going all the way from the audio pin on the DIN 5 connector all the way over to here and all the way back over to the DIN 13 connector. I've shortened this bit so that it's not got any chance now of getting trapped in that little prong that comes out the bottom of the motherboard, and I've resoldered it onto here and put new heat shrink on it. So there we go. So that's the work that was done on the back of the board. I think we'll pop the board back in the case just so we don't put any undue stress on those little wires. So there we go, and this basically, the internals of this machine at least went together without any serious issues whatsoever. It's also already had, the previous installer did put a 74 FO8 chip in it, and I did test it with a GoWin equipped SIDE3 cartridge just to see if that would work, because in fact it was the customer's SIDE3 cartridge, which I've now packed away, but I have got another one so we can test it like so. So let's have a look, and it turned out that the ultimate 1MB, although you can't buy them with my firmware pre-installed anymore, it had been upgraded to my firmware by the original installer already. So there was nothing to do in terms of firmware upgrades, but anyway, I'm going to show you the machine in operation. And although I haven't, the customer didn't actually send up the keyboard because it's got a detachable keyboard, of course, the XEGS. I have no doubt that it's in, hopefully it's in as nice condition as the rest of the case. And of course the keyboard I'm going to plug into this thing is absolutely manky, just like most of my stuff is, but it works. And hooray, it works! So like I say, this has got the necessary firmware pre-installed. Thankfully we haven't got anything resembling the problems we had with a prior machine from a few months back. There was a video on the channel about it. Now what I did notice, this one is configured, by the way, helpfully by the original installer, so that it's start reset to get into the setup menu rather than help and reset, because of course the help key is on the external keyboard. It's a little bit limiting what you can actually do inside the setup menu if you don't have the keyboard plugged in, although of course you can control things to a certain extent with the joystick, so that's a possibility. Oh, and there's something we have forgotten to do, of course, on this particular computer. Nobody has put the XEGS jumper on the Ultimate 1MB board. Right, so I'm going to have to take the screws out again and show you what to do there. Right, so I nearly forgot to do this, but I haven't forgotten because I'm doing it now. And this is something the original installer should really have done, I would say, is configure the Ultimate board for XEGS operation. And that's a two-step process. You need to put the jumper on the XEGS jumper pair right there, and select the XEGS OS, which is pre-installed on the firmware anyway, that's no problem. And only then will you get the proper XEGS behavior, whereby missile command starts up when the machine started up without the keyboard when Sparta-DOS X isn't enabled, and that kind of thing. And that should really be done as part of the Ultimate install process in an XEGS machine, unless the customer specifically requests for some reason that that isn't done. I can't really see any reason why you would, because if you don't have things configured, you're never ever going to see missile command, and the machine's just not going to operate in quite the expected manner. So I'll go away and try and find a little jumper to put on here. Right, I managed to find one. I mean, why not provide one with the board? All you had to do is just put it on so it's not actually jumpering the pins. Sell it like that, with the jumper hanging off. And if the customer doesn't need it, he can throw it away. And if he does need it, it's there already. How much does this cost? Right, that's all I had to do. There we go. So that's jumpered now. Now we put it back together. Okay, let's have another go. So now, when we look in the menu here, what we should see is Computer XEGS, which we do. So that's what you want to be seeing when you've put an Ultimate 1MB in an XEGS. All that's going to do is give us the bit in the port B register that actually turns on the missile command game. But nothing will happen with that until you choose the appropriate operating system. And that operating system is XEGS OS. So we'll save that now. In fact, we'll turn off Sparta-DOS X and see. Notice that the missile command item has now become ungrayed out because it's an XEGS machine. Oh, we'll have Altera Basic as well, because it's just light years better than stock Basic. Okay, and I'll turn this off as well for now. Take the SIDE3 out, because I just wanted to show you it boot up. So if with the keyboard connected, we should boot to basic, I think. Which we do. Right, now if I turn it off again and disconnect the keyboard and turn on again, we should boot to missile command. Which we do. So there we go, we now got proper XEGS operation. So I'll put the keyboard back in, I'll put the SIDE3 back in. The reason that this is my go-in SIDE 3.2, by the way, the reason it's got the case off has been because I've been experimenting with different JED files just to suit the customer's machine. The customer's board's identical to this one, and I noticed something interesting which I don't know if I'll be able to show you because I think I've upgraded the JED file. But JED 1.3, which was the original FPGA code for the Go-In SIDE3, I just noticed yesterday actually, never noticed before, the hard disk activity light didn't work with the original JED file. And you may remember we had all the argy-bargy with SIDE3 and the reliability issues when they decided to change the JED back in February 2024 to adjust some timings ostensibly, and in my experience it completely fucked up the whole thing. And I had a customer machine and I couldn't understand why the SIDE3 wouldn't work, and I noticed the JED revision which I'd never even seen before and nobody told me about. But that JED upgrade and the subsequent fix for that JED, which I think is version 1.4 that Candle produced, both of them did fix the hard disk activity LED issue as a matter of interest. So really, if you did have one of the boards with a problematic JED file, you want to be, if possible, if it'll work for you, you want to be going for JED 1.4. So if we have a look at this one, right, so on this one here we've got JED version 1.3, so this is exactly the correct one. So I'm going to set the camera up so you can see. Right, so I'm going to start read-write test here. And what we should see is a little light flashing on and off here, just to indicate that there's some read-write activity on the SD card. Right, so let's see what happens. No light, nothing at all. And no light when it's reading the directory. We did get a flash, but I think it flashed there because it was doing a card reset. So, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upgrade the JED using my trusty cable. I have to take this out for a minute. I'm going to upgrade it to JED 1.4. Oh, it's actually called 2.4. God, it's pretty confusing. We'll turn this on. So we got a little flash there. That's part of the programming process. Okay, so that should be it. And if we turn on, take the cable out. Right, there we go. Right, so now I've upgraded the JED. Let's go in and see what happens. There we go. We've got the red light working. Excellent. And if we go along here, we should see it's 2.4. I've been calling it 1.4 in my discussions with the client. I guess it had to be 2.4 because the bad version was 2.3. Prior to that it was 1.3, so version 1.3 the LED doesn't work. Version 2.3 the LED works but the cartridges didn't work in the majority of instances. And with 2.4 finally everything works. Yeah, I've tested this already with the customer's cartridge with JED 2.4 as it turns out on it. And it completed an RWCRC test. That program there, it completed that test without any problems at all, and you can see it working here with the little LED going on the quicker test. No problems at all. So that's, as far as I can tell, all working nicely, and the light works as well. But as I say, this is my cartridge, and I just took the case off and downgraded the JED just to demonstrate the LED issue to you. So what have we learned from this experience? Well, hopefully we've learned that the purple Ultimate 1 megabyte revision from Litharic and Retro Lemon works, or at least it seems to work well in this particular machine. First time I've encountered one, so we'll see as time goes on, but I'm hopeful that all the problems of the past have gone away. I've also learned not to use the step drill when cutting holes in an XEGS case. It was the first time I've done it, and I promise it'll be the last time I do it. And I'm only sorry that that particular XEGS case had to be the sacrificial lamb for me to learn that lesson the hard way. But nevertheless, we've got over it, and we've actually got a nicer machine, I think, at the end of it. And a potential, either a donor machine, because the customer's expressed interest in having a 1088 XEL built. So he's going to need a complete set of VLSI chips for that project if it gets off the ground, so maybe that motherboard could be used as a donor, or maybe he wants to put some upgrades in the XEGS. If he could find a Sophia 2, or when Sophia 3 comes out, maybe we could put one in there, and that square hole at the back of the case wouldn't actually look that bad. It would almost look as if it was meant to be all along, and how wonderful would that be? Speaking of Sophia, we've got Sophia 3 on the cards at some point. I don't know when it's going to become available. I've been in touch with Simius about Antonia 2, and he's kindly offered to send an XE and an XL version in for evaluation and review when the time comes. And I think Simius appears to understand how reviews work, whereby you basically get to keep the stuff you sent. The only people who I think return stuff that's for review is when the creator's bought it himself, reviews it, providing it's covered within the warranty of the manufacturer's warranty. Sometimes you can actually buy stuff, unpack it, review it, and send it back, and they'll give you a refund on it. But yeah, if you're trying to publicise your stuff and you want me to spend time making a video about it and giving an honest opinion about it, if you'd like that done, by all means send the stuff in, even if I need it or I don't. I'll review it for you. I'll do you the courtesy of reviewing it, but don't necessarily expect me to start posting it back at my own expense. That's not how it works. So yeah, what I forgot to mention to Simius actually is that I don't know whether he wants me to do a Sophia 3 installation video when that device is ready as well. So if he wants to send me a Sophia 3, he did send me a Sophia 2 at some point in the past for the same reason. So if Simius, when the time comes, as well as the Antonia boards, if you want to send a Sophia 3 in, and I'll make a video all about it for you and go into great detail about how to fit it in the machine and publicise its capabilities, be happy to do that. But no, I'm not going to buy stuff at this point just for the purposes of making videos about it and publicising other people's projects. I can't afford it because this particular occupation of mine is not very lucrative at the moment, and I think it's on the wane. So bear that in mind. So anyway, I hope you found that one interesting. I know it wasn't the most groundbreaking video, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to find subject matter for stuff at the moment, to be honest. Plus the fact we've had this heat wave in the UK, and I do not deal well with humidity and heat. But hardly anybody has air conditioning in the UK, so I've had this desk fan, a fairly big desk fan, over the other side of the room, blowing 24/7 almost, just to keep me cool, keep this room livable, tolerable. And of course that's noisy, and most of the time I don't even have the lights on in here during the day. And of course, to make this video footage, I've got the overhead desk light, I've got the main light, and I've got the LED backlight behind the B camera here. So, and I'm sweating now actually. It's the heat wave's supposed to be coming to an end, but it's still ridiculously humid. That's not that. The other day it was 68% or something like that, and it's higher than that outside, of course. But anyway, so there it is. So that's the XEGS with the new purple Ultimate 1MB in it, and it was an assignment that was fraught with a little bit of drama. Mistakes were made and lessons were learned. So anyway, thank you so much. Thank you especially to my patrons, as ever, those that are still with it. And thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing your comments in the comment section. And of course, thank you to the video sponsor as ever. And with that, I will leave you and hopefully be back with something exciting in the next video. So thanks for watching, and bye-bye for now.